We are with you here on a really, I think, interesting day in the hockey world, Julian, where Katie Strang is going to join us here, momentarily to talk about what has been a day filled with, I think, a lot of speculation, and we want to steer away from kind of speculation, stick to facts, but. Boy, oh boy, as it pertains to Hockey Canada in 2018, I don't know that there's a more important story, right? Is that fair to say in the hockey world today, as you either wake up or you listen to our podcast on a Wednesday, there's nothing more important than this story involving the 2018 World Junior Hockey Team, is there?
Yeah, it's a story that the hockey world collectively has been waiting on the next chapter for months, it feels like. Well, pretty much since the lawsuit was filed and everything after that, we have noticed the changes, the seismic changes to Hockey Canada, and there has been speculation on who has been involved, and it's wrapped everyone up. So of course it's the biggest story to talk about, and considering some of the details that we'll get into with Katie Strang when we have her on, this is a story that's going to be talked about for a couple days. This isn't going to be a story that, today being a Wednesday, we're going to focus on it and then Thursday we'll forget. A lot of people are going to be hanging on this for quite some time. They're going to be looking at so many different possible connections, and I know we're not going to get into it, but this is going to be a story that we're going to be tackling for quite some time. And I think we're all just kind of bracing for the further ramifications from this.
Yeah. And just to give the listeners a little bit of context of what the story is we're talking about on this Wednesday, and that is Robin Doolittle, who, if you're in the United States, the name Robin Doolittle may not resonate with you. Robin Doolittle is a Globe and Mail reporter in Canada, a news kind of does not really do too much in the sports realm. Most of Robin's expertise is in other areas, but this is right up her lane. She is one of the premier investigative reporters in this country. She is a champion for freedom of information, very much like Katie Strang is in America. And Katie, obviously, her work comes into Canada too. But Robin is in Canada one of the preeminent investigative reporters in our country. And in the Globe and Mail on Wednesday, Robin reports that 5 members of that 2018 World Junior Hockey Team have been told, you need to come to London and talk to the police. And what's clear is that nobody's been charged yet. Nothing has accelerated there. But the fact of the matter is, Robin Doolittle reports 5 players from that team have been told to report. It makes you feel like, you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. The inevitable charges are laid, and then once charges are laid, that is the case. Well, I think we do have Katie Strang ready to go. In fact, she's in the chat, so I know for sure Katie Strang is on board, and we welcome her into this Wednesday edition of the Athletic Hockey Show. And Katie, you have followed this story from the get-go back in and it feels like, I can't believe how long it's been, but we're talking about 3 years here, right? Or two, whatever it is, 2 years. May of 2022, right? That this all, boy, now my timeline is.
No, you're right.
You're absolutely right. Yes.
Julian has been handling the timeline.
That's right. That's right. Julian's been handling.
That's when Rick West had first reported the court case. So that's when it sort of became a part of the public consciousness. Yes.
Yeah. And for us, and we said, right, Julian and I said right off the top, in these types of situations, the key is now to stick to facts and not to try to get speculative or to try to think about who, there's no names involved. So maybe if you could just maybe share with our listeners here, Katie, and our viewers, like as we sit here and have this conversation at 2:00 Eastern time on Wednesday, what do we know?
So we know from Robin Doolittle of the Toronto Globe and Mail's report, and I think you guys probably already covered this in the show. She's a terrific reporter who's uncovered a great deal of huge, important, sensitive stories. She's done incredible work on sexual assault in the way that is, investigated and prosecuted in Canada. So no surprise that she has been terrific on this subject as well. So she reported earlier today that there are 5 members of the World Junior hockey team from that 2018 Hockey Canada team that have been asked to surrender themselves to the London police to face sexual assault charges. That they've been given a certain time period to report. We don't know what that time period is. So that's what we know from her report. We know that the London Police Service, I have contacted them. They said that they are unable to comment at this time, but that, when there's anything concrete that has come to fruition as a result of their investigation, if it does, they will make some sort of statement. We've reached out to the league. The league says that there's nothing that they can say at this time. The PA is also not commenting. And then we know, that there are a handful of players who have taken leaves of absences from their teams. I want to be really careful here, because I think given the fact that these are very serious allegations, very serious subject matter, I think it's really incumbent upon us to act with the most, extreme sense of responsibility and judiciousness in the way that we report these matters. So there are dots, I think, that people are trying to connect, but I don't think we have the full picture yet.
Okay. One question I have is, this is a story that a lot of people in the hockey world have been waiting on, and we thought, I know for myself, I thought maybe this was something that was going to pop up last summer. Maybe this was something that was going to eventually drop before training camp. We're in January of 2024. Why has this taken as much time as it has before we've reached this point where we know 5 players are going to have to surrender themselves to police? Like, why has this taken the time that it's taken?
Okay, so you have to remember that there's 3 sort of like parallel and potentially overlapping investigations. 4, if you consider, the parliamentary, Heritage Committee investigation too. But there's primarily there's the Hockey Canada investigation, there's the NHL investigation, and then there's the London Police investigation. Now, because the London Police are investigating this as a criminal matter, like, it's fair to view that as the superseding investigation, the sort of central investigation that essentially trumps all others, right? So when you frame it in that context, then I think it's helpful to understand that the London police are not going to be governed or dictated by an NHL schedule. They don't give a shit when the All-Star break is. They do not they are not going to make moves based on when opening night is or when there is a long West Coast road trip. Okay. So I think that's why you are seeing this take this long. And the fact of the matter is, there's so much that we don't know about, like, all of the nuances and subtext of this investigation. We have no idea what sort of, actually, we do have some idea of, search warrants and stuff, but, forensic analysis can take a super long time in terms of, if they have to go through phones, if they have to go through messages, if they have to analyze metadata. And also remember that there's, the initial allegation was that there were 8 members of that team involved in some capacity with this alleged assault. Sort of the more recent development from the London police were that they felt like they had enough evidence to potentially charge 5 members in that alleged assault. So those are 5 to 8 different individuals who have potentially, like, similar overlapping, levels of potential legal exposure, and in some ways aligned interests and sometimes competing interests. So, I'm taking a very circuitous path to say that there's a lot of different competing interests at play, and to be able to do, I think, a very thorough, robust, nuanced investigation, and to do it right, it takes time. Like, that type of stuff doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah, and I think too, to further that point, Katie, it's important that the listeners know that initially the London Police Department did not lay charges, right? Did not lay criminal charges when they did their original investigation. But the fact that they reopened it now I think, and because this is such a case with such public interest in Canada, they have to get this right. Right? Like Katie, like they have to, there is a tremendous amount of scrutiny, and there will be from reporters like us, Rick Westhead, Robin Doolittle. There's going to be people pressing for freedom of information. How did this how did you come to these conclusions? So they have to make sure that they get this right. Isn't that part of this?
Of course.
Well?
Yeah. I mean, I think they are going to want to be extremely diligent, leave no stone unturned. At the time that there was an application with the court, when they, sort of made that position known to the court that they felt like they had sufficient evidence to move forward with a case against 5 of those individuals. They also indicated in that warrant packet that they were still trying to track down certain individuals that they felt might have meaningful information about this case. I seem to remember that one of them was a taxi driver or an Uber driver that might have given the woman a ride home that night. So, I mean, chasing down some of those, loose ends can take a really long time. If you're doing trauma-informed investigation, you also want to be extremely sensitive to the fact that this is really difficult subject matter, and trauma can have a very physiological impact on the brain, and it's not always easy for people who have been involved in traumatic crimes to be able to remember things easily or in necessarily a linear fashion. And so, there are a bunch of different reasons that this has probably taken a lot of time. And the practical reality is, like, we can't possibly know at this point, what that investigation has looked like, what the contours of that probe have been, what hurdles, institutionally they might have faced, whether there are people they're still trying to get in touch with, and what sort of back and forth there might be with, the counsel for the players involved.
Do you think it gets to a point where the 5 names, they are formally revealed? Like, we know it's just 5 and there are people trying to make connections, but do you think does it ever get to a point where we as the public get to actually know the 5 people?
Yes, but let me offer a caveat to that, which is, like,
Sure.
I'm saying this as an American. So if this
Sure.
were happening in the US legal system, I feel pretty confident of that. I don't know the intricacies of Canadian law enough to know, like, the boundaries of publication bans and privacy protections in the Canadian court system and how those might intersect with this particular case. But my understanding is, if these 5 individuals are going to be charged, and I think that's, again, based on Robin's body of work, I have no reason to doubt that she's not going to report that unless that is imminent. Those charges, will be, filed with the court. They will be a matter of public record to some degree. What I'm just unsure of is whether us as the media will be bound in any way because of any potential publication bans.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, so I had a great conversation today, Katie and Julian, with a woman named Ava Williams. She's a lawyer in the London area, and actually, when Ava Williams was a teenager at going to university in London, she actually sued the London Police Department because she was the victim of a sexual assault, and she felt like the London Police Department essentially bungled her case, and she has made it her life's work to focus on this, and had a conversation with her today about kind of what we can expect. So to your point, Katie, and I'm just looking at my notes from my conversation with her, she said that there might be a publication ban here given the nature of the complaint, but she believes because the person, EM, I think was the initials, right, of the victim, because she was an adult at the time, she believes that this could very well be open to the media to come and observe and report. And the other thing that I thought was interesting that she told me is that in all likelihood, if there are 5 people charged, they would likely kind of be tried together, so to speak, so that the victim wouldn't have to go to 5 separate court cases and re-traumatize themselves on 5 different occasions. So that's kind of what I was able to glean from a conversation with Ava Williams. But you're right, like there's so many nuances here with Canadian law and Ontario law that I think make this a really like delicate situation, right? And we just have to handle it with so much care. And I want our listeners and people who follow us at The Athletic to know that we're handling this with the utmost care, right? Like we're paying attention to this story. We're not avoiding it. We're not tiptoeing around it because we're scared. We're doing this because this is, as Katie knows, you've done so much reporting in this space. There's a degree of caution that has to be exercised that I don't know that everybody quite understands, right?
Yeah, I mean, I encounter that a lot in my reporting, that I think when people know you're working on a story and you haven't reported it yet, like I think it's natural for people maybe outside of the business to think that, you're not reporting it for reasons A, B, and C. And it's often, I mean, like the simple solution is stories that require a great deal of investigative work take a lot of time, a lot of resources, and a tremendous amount of care and caution. You don't want to ever get that wrong. You don't want to ever report anything, when you don't feel extremely confident that your information is going to be unimpeachable and beyond reproach, because there are very serious implications for all of the individuals involved that you're reporting on, and it's really doing a disservice to the subject matter if you're not treating it with the appropriate amount of gravity and diligence. So, to anyone like frustrated about the dearth of information, we are too. We get that. We understand that. We're journalists. We're doing our best to both, balance the need for information with being able to provide it to the readers in a way that's fully vetted, informed, responsible, and, carefully reported.
I'm curious. I know you being in the United States, perhaps the story doesn't have that same amount of resonance in the media cycle compared to other stories. But in Canada, obviously, when the lawsuit went out and any other development that comes up, it ends up being a massive, big deal in Canada. And we've seen the government MPs speak their piece on it. We've seen the stories of sponsors pulling out from Hockey Canada. There have been seismic changes at Hockey Canada, change of leadership, and now we've reached this point. I'm just curious from how you see things, and obviously you reporting on the story, doing a great job on it, but seeing how much people in the hockey world have wrapped themselves in this story and how this has turned into a grander discussion about hockey culture and how people should conduct themselves. What are your impressions of how big of a story this has become, thanks to your reporting, thanks to Rick Westhead's reporting, thanks to Robin Doolittle's reporting?
It's hard for me to probably be able to like answer that question as well as, you guys can as Canadians, because I'm not sort of immersed in the everyday of it. I mean, it's a known story here. It's not as seismic as it is in Canada, where it's obviously, dominating headlines and front page news whenever there are significant developments. But as it relates to its impact on the hockey world, I mean, I would say it's extremely significant for all the reasons that you listed, which is, it encapsulates, I think, some broader questions about hockey culture, and about institutions and how we treat certain subjects, and, how we discuss certain things. And, it's timely, it's topical. And I think part of it is it has persisted for so long. It has prompted parliamentary hearings. It has prompted, certain entities to reopen investigation. That's really rare. So I think you're seeing all of these unprecedented things happen in response. And I think that really underscores its significance and importance in the broader, consciousness of the news cycle.
Before we let you go, I want to ask you one question, Katie, and it's more of a industry question because it's something that I've gotten a lot lately. And I know you tweeted out the story today that you, Dan Robson, and I worked on, back in 2022. And people are angry that these types of stories are behind a paywall. And I want to just give you an opportunity to just very rationally explain to people, because what happens on social media is you try to get into a conversation with somebody about a paywall and it never quite goes, and you don't quite maybe have the runway that you need. And I think so much of your work has been so important, and it's behind a paywall, but it's for a reason why it's behind a paywall. And I want to give you an opportunity to answer that, because again, today it happened where you put that out and I looked at the mentions, made a mistake, and all these people are saying, lift the paywall. Why is this behind a paywall?
Yeah, and I certainly understand like the public interest in this. And I think there are scenarios in which, we do decide to put things out of the paywall. As you and I both know, Julian too, like those decisions are generally not made by the writer. They're made at a higher level. But at the end of the day, quality journalism, and especially investigative journalism, takes a tremendous amount of time, money, effort, and resources. I think if people knew how much labor went into every story, and that means labor on the reporter's end, on the editorial end from editors, on a travel budget, and also on the legal. And these stories are thoroughly vetted from a legal perspective, and they go through exhaustive editorial review. That takes money, and it takes a lot of work. It takes time, it takes money, and it takes a commitment from your company to decide that that's something of value and a service to our readers. I'm very proud of the fact that The Athletic has chosen time and time again that this is something that we value and that we will devote time, money, and resources to. I think you are seeing fewer and fewer outlets and entities willing to do that. And so, if you want that sort of accountability journalism and, investigative journalism, you have to be willing to understand that requires, it requires support. And we're certainly really also grateful for all of our subscribers that always show us that it's very valuable to them and that they're willing to support it too. I guess the one other thing that I would tell you is, this story today was broken by the Toronto Globe and Mail. Again, an excellent publication. Robin Doolittle's incredible. You cannot walk up to a newsstand and take a newspaper off the newsstand and just walk away with it.
Yeah.
It's a good or a service. And I would say, all work should be treated with dignity, and all work should be valued. And I think, everyone deserves to be paid for their work and the services they provide. And that certainly is not limited to journalists.
There you go. Well said, and better than you can say in 280 characters or whatever, whatever it is
Exactly.
we're allowed on X. Okay, Katie, thank you so much. I know it's a busy day for you. Actually, it's never not a busy day for you. Like, you've got 2 kids to juggle, and
one's sick right now. I've had five snow days in the past week and a half. Yeah.
Oh boy. Wow.
Of course. All right. Well, listen, thanks for in the midst of a sick child and snow days and all this investigative stuff. We appreciate you dropping by the podcast for a few minutes.
Of course. Thanks for having me.